Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. That's going to be my thesis statement. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. If I wanted to add a title to the text, it would simply be, I've already suffered enough. I've already suffered enough. With Easter coming up and all that, I just felt it befitting to have our Easter service now because I've already suffered enough. So my dear beloved brothers and sisters, Resurrection Sunday is rapidly approaching, which is next Sunday, not this Sunday. I don't want to confuse nobody. But I wanted to take a real brief time to talk about the significance of suffering, the significance that Jesus suffered, the significance that we actually suffer. And sometimes we don't allow ourselves to suffer. So a lot of our suffering, believe it or not, it goes unnoticed. A lot of the suffering you do goes unnoticed. Okay. And so, but Jesus was scourged by the Romans. The Bible does not indicate how many times Jesus had lashes on his back. It does not indicate it. However, in the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about that a criminal should get no more than 40 lashes. Anything past 40 lashes, it's against the law. That's Jewish tradition. But who was Jesus beat by and flogged by? He was beaten, flogged by who? The Romans. So there is no real thing that said that Jesus took 39 lashes or even 40 lashes. Who's to say that the Romans followed the Jewish law or the Jewish tradition? But scourging in that day was ordered by Jesus, by Pontius Pilate, as a means of them to let Jesus go. The only reason Pilate ordered for Jesus to be flogged and scourged is because he found no guilt in him. So ultimately, Pilate was literally trying to set Jesus up to get released after he suffered a while, right? Okay, but of course, we know the story, right? But his own folk was like, no, crucify him. So because I could find no fault in this man, maybe if I beat him enough, maybe if I make him suffer enough, I can let him go. So what has God beaten you with that have you suffering and he's trying to let you go? So we hear the story of Jesus' death so often, but sometimes we fail to stop and think about the evilly of how he was actually treated to those that he came to save and to those that he came to serve. So Jesus came here to serve, he came here to save, and the very people he's saving and serving wants to crucify him. Sometimes the people that you come to save and serve will be the ones to crucify you. We talking about disobedient children, right? We come to save and serve and help, but you're trying to crucify me. And so I'm suffering for you, but you don't even appreciate the suffering that I'm going through. So that's what Jesus was doing for us. And we know one of the most famous scriptures, and I think a lot of people don't even really dive into the text. It says, well, he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. And the chastisement of our peace was placed upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Now, in this prophecy, when he says stripes, it's talking about how many lashes or how many stripes he actually had to endure as he was getting flogged and as he was getting scourged. But the Bible doesn't literally say whether it was 39, whether it was 40, whether it was 41. So a lot of people take this text out of context, okay? But back then, if you do a little research, it was roughly about 39 diseases. And that's why they came up with the Jewish tradition that you can get no more than 40 lashes. And each lash represents a disease being whipped away from your body. So you wouldn't have to suffer with that disease anymore. Now, I'm not a doctor. I can't even say the word. One of y'all smart people can tell me the ecologists, whatever they are, to go out and find the name of these new diseases. Fetchy, whatever his job is, right? Like those people who tell you all these different diseases and all these viruses and all this other, how do they come up with all that stuff? I don't know. But back in these days, they had only found 39 of them. So they say it is against the law to beat somebody 40 or more. So they were justifying being able to beat you. The same way they justified the COVID shot. The same way they justify things for diabetes. Same way they justify things for HIV. They justify the diseases that come up against our body. So this was the way that the Jews justified being able to beat you, but not to a pulp, right? You know how your parents used to say, if I come in that room one more time, I'm giving you warning before you get your lashes, right? And so this is what the Jewish tradition was. But we all know that his death was carried out by crucifixion, not by him being flogged, not by him taking how many other slashes he took and lashes that he took. He was actually crucified. So apparently the lashes wasn't enough. Sometimes for some people, you got to cut them off because allowing them to suffer isn't enough. Right? You got to let that joker crucify themselves. Okay, so his death was to be carried out by crucifixion after the flogging, after the scourging. But did you know there's numerous types of suffering? There are numerous types of suffering. Believe it or not, all the different suffering that we go through in life can be narrowed down to 4. Whatever type of suffering you go through, anything you go through in life as it relates to suffering, it can be narrowed down into 4. And those are going to be my key points for today. One has to deal with birth. Another one has to do with aging. Another one has to do with sickness. I ain't talking about the common cold. And the last one, believe it or not, has to do with death. There are 4 sufferings out of all the different sufferings and all the different things that we go through is going to be narrowed down into these particular 4. And believe it or not, believe it or not, most of us already done dealt with 2 of them. Some of us might be even dealing with 3 right now. Okay? At a minimum, you dealt with 2. At a minimum, you dealt with 2. Why? Because 1, you're already born, which takes me to the first one, all right? Birth. So the birth suffering, believe it or not, has attacked my family, the Brody family, twice. Twice. One time, unfortunately, I was not here. So Tammy had to deal with that on her own, deal with that suffering on her own. And believe it or not, the young lad it happened to is sitting right in here with me, which is Jeremiah. Jeremiah was born, well, he was in the womb with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. Right? He's in there with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. You're talking about suffering. The doctor's probably running every which way. You got all this mental stuff, right? Mental suffering, emotional suffering is going on at this current time while the child is experiencing what? Birth suffering. So you see how various different sufferings, they marry in with each other. He don't know what to do. He ain't even born yet. She don't know what to do, probably first time she ever experienced it, right? I wasn't here, so I don't know, right? And so, but luckily, with God's grace and with God's mercy, they was able to get it untied, and voila, we have Jeremiah. Unfortunately, however, August 17th, 2004, I hope I got that right. If not, that boy killed me. 2003, thank you. I actually got to witness birth suffering head on. I've been shot at. I even rolled over ID before. Just got a real bad headache. You know, I don't have TBI. I'm okay. But seeing the birth of Jaden, it changed my perspective on life. It really did. His birth was a twofold birth. And the reason I say twofold because he could have probably left here twice in the process of being born, because we're talking about birth suffering. And so the problem with Jaden was that he been fast all his life. He been fast all his life. The boy has been fast all his life. Normal childbirth, the baby comes out flipped upside down. head facing down. Jaden was what they call a sunny side up baby. So he was looking at me and I'm looking at him. He looking at me, I'm looking at him. He turning colors. Turning colors. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Next thing the doctor say is what? Don't move. Don't push. Deal with the contraction. Can't do nothing. What has God done in your life where he put you on pause? You can't go forward, right? You can't go forward because if you push, you're jeopardizing the life of the child. You can't go backwards because then you suck the child back in you, which is going to be harmful to the parent. So what do you do during a birth suffering experience where if I go forward or if I go back, I could lose my life? It doesn't matter at this point, right? It doesn't matter what I've done in the past. It doesn't matter what I'm going to do in the future. What matters is this very single moment that I stay as still as possible in order to save not one, but 2 lives. What type of position does God be putting us in to where as though if I move either which way, I'm jeopardizing life? If I move forward, I'm jeopardizing the child's life. If I move backwards, I'm jeopardizing my life. So how do I deal with that type of suffering in the moment? Can I trust God enough that the people he's placed around me, that they're giving me the right advice of to be still? The Bible says what? Be still and know that I am God. At that moment, do I know that he is God? Or am I really letting all these emotion and this suffering go through my mind and take me to places where I don't need to be? So that was the scariest part for me. When I seen this little big old head, whoosh, cheeks jawed out, turning different colors, and they said, skirt, stop. Whoa, doc, hey, fix it. Hey, I'm military through and through. Fix him. Fix him. You got to fix him. Then they tell Tammy, don't move. My heart went on a pause. You all know when you're breathing that you have what they call a natural respiratory pause. You inhale and exhale, your body has 7 seconds where it's extremely still and doesn't move. In the art of marksmanship, that's when you would fire your shot. So I equated Jaden's birth to shooting a weapon. I equated this kid's birth, my son, love him dearly, to shooting a weapon. Because the only way it will work out for both parties involved is if we took a natural respiratory pause and allow God to be God for 7 seconds. And then which then transformed, longest 7 seconds you ever seen in your life, and how they was able to twist his whole head in his body and pull him out right. He took about 3 or 4 smacks, but then he started crying, right? And so all of us have our own birth story, birth suffering story, right? Job says it this way: man born of woman is what? Fewer days and of trouble. So even when you come in, you already trouble. So he hadn't even been here 5 minutes and he's already experiencing trouble. So 2 out of my 5 that I know has suffered during birth. They suffered during birth. So but now, the next one is aging. We all getting old, right? I can't get up and jump out the bed no more, Zaya. Like I got to ease out that joker, right? I got to ease out. Sometimes you got to hit snooze and roll back over, right? But this week I'm happy. I celebrated 47 years of life. I celebrated 47 years of life, and the one thing I know that comes along with age is mental anguish. Suffering. We talking about dysfunction, discomfort, distress, stressful life situations, financial problems, work problems, relationship problems. And if that ain't enough, sometimes you get chronic medical illnesses, right? And so as we age, as we get older, we suffer, but we learn how to do what? Live with it. We learn how to live with it, right? At 20 some years old, I can get up, go run 4 or 5 miles, motivate a Marine. I ain't getting up and running nowhere now, right? That's that mental anguish. That's that mental discomfort. That's that mental distress. Because I don't want to put my body through what? The pain of what? Growth. So as we get older, we stop growing. Believe it or not, as you get older, the things you like to do now is helping you build a stronger body, a stronger temple. You go outside, you play football, you lift weights. When you get old, I ain't lifting weights no more. So I'm allowing my body to do what? Deteriorate from what I initially built it to be. Okay, so when I'm young, right? I'm young. I'm going to take over the world. I'm strong. I'm building my body to be strong. Why am I, and if in fact, this what they say, I don't say this, they say when you get older, you're supposed to get wiser. They, whoever they is, that's what they say. When you get older, you're supposed to get wiser. If I'm supposed to get wiser when I get older, why do I stop working out and allow my body to deteriorate? So if in my youth, especially if I play youth sports, high school sports or whatever, I'm in the gym, I'm working out, I'm getting my miles in. I'm trying to eat healthy, but I have a Snickers every now and then, right? So I'm bulking up. I'm building size. I made the team. I'm on varsity now. I'm good. I might go to college. I'm still working out. I make it to the league. I'm still working out. I get out the league. I start to diminish. So if in fact they say, if I need to get wiser as I get older, why did I stop what continually helped me be strong and grow? The same thing physically in sports, same thing spiritually in the Bible. When you first have your encounter with God, people be hungry. They be hungry. They want to study more, right? Because they're curious. Because I'm curious, I want to learn more. I want to learn more. So I'm building my spirituality. I'm building. And now that I think I've got a little bit, or I know a little bit of something, I'm supposed to be wiser, so I should continue development. But a lot of the elder people in the church don't study the way they used to when they first start believing in God. So they're literally allowing themselves to diminish spiritually because they lack their growth in the discipline that they had when they first started. You ever wondered why? I'm not bashing no churches, but if you ever wonder why a lot of churches don't grow, it's because their leader has stopped studying with what? Bible says, study to show thyself what? Approved unto God. They're not studying the way they used to. That's why it may sound like they're preaching the same sermon, because they're not studying the way that they used to. They're doing a bunch of copy and pasting. Study. Show yourself approved, right? A good workman unto God. And so with aging, they're suffering. But they don't realize they're suffering because they're doing what's normal. So as your body age, different things start to happen. Jeans start to get a little snug, right? I don't say I'm getting fat. I go buy a bigger size. Right? Amen. Right? And so, but we have to face the reality that I'm suffering as I age. I'm suffering as I age. Another common thing that suffers with age is our emotional state. Because you're not the same person you were at 18, 21, 25, 30, 40, 60, blah, 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 blah. So things emotionally happen to us at various stages of life. If you ever had a traumatic event, I bet you probably can call it off at this age if it was something traumatic or PTSD that happened to you early on. Right? My dad didn't come to the basketball game. I still remember to this day. Because he lied. He said he was coming. He ain't come. It is what it is now. But I remember it. So it's stored away in my emotional intelligence. And so we all know that mental health leads to what? Sometimes depression, anxiety, PTSD, Okay, but the Bible tells us, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by what? The renewing of the mind. And when your mind is renewed, you can test and approve God's good and perfect will. But God gives us commands, okay? God's will of command, and you got God's sovereign will, which does not change. And so if the only commands I have to work with is God's command, because I can't change his sovereign command, the only way I can renew my mind is by dealing with my issues as I age. So I shouldn't be making the same financial mistakes I made at 21, at 47. I should have renewed my mind to a sense where I'm not, what they call it, robbing Peter to pay Paul. My mind should be renewed enough now to where as though I can deal with relationship problems because I know how to set boundaries. I know how to cut people off, right? And so, but I'm suffering with this stuff emotionally because I'm still working on renewing my mind. And so some people feel like they're helpless. Some people feel like they're hopeless because they haven't renewed their mind yet to understand the true commands of God's will. So as you age, certain things will just happen. Certain people feel like they're not needed anymore, right? And so why do you feel that way? Because you're not renewing your mind as your body ages. The next one we're going to talk about sickness, right? So previously I mentioned, stuff about mentally and emotionally, but sometimes we have chronic illnesses that stay with us for longevity. I'm talking about stuff like cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, and so on and so forth. My godmother, rest her soul, she died from cancer. One of the sweetest women could bake the best sweet potato pie known to man in this side of Baltimore. I wasn't here to watch my grandmother Sue diminish, but my family was. She went from walking up and down the steps on her own to moving her bed to the front room, to moving her bed to the downstairs, to moving her bed to close to the kitchen, right? So over time, her suffering became normalcy in life. So what type of cancers, what type of illnesses do you suffer with day to day that has become part of your life? And you don't realize it because you're dealing with it, that it's actually destroying you on the inside. It's destroying you on the inside. Probably one of the hardest deaths I had to experience was the loss of my father's mother. She was it. She was it to me. Not because she done everything right, but because she loved me with my flaws. She didn't judge me. Even when they caught me out on the corner doing something I shouldn't be doing, she came and picked me up. Really? Came and picked me up. Her and Sharon. When I was down your mother's house. When I was down your mother's house acting a plumb fool. Okay? But because, we both got different sides of the family where it's more structure on one side, less structure on the other side. And you always want to go to the side of the family that has what? The less structure. So with less structure, you get into more trouble. Okay? And then when your family members see you out there, like, no. And to me, she took it as she lost her son. I'm not going to lose my grandson. That's how I ended up at Sue House. With Aunt Diane, but that's another story. But literally when she passed away, we drove from South Carolina up here to the funeral. And up here, and so just to see the entire breakdown of the family still ain't got it together yet. So sometimes you got certain individuals that's inside of the family, if they do get this chronic sickness and they suffer with it, when they die, the family dies. We literally just started getting back together last year, just going to watch the football game. And so it's finally starting to come around. But all that time has been missed. All that time has been missed, right? And so that's the third one. And last but not least is death. People don't like to talk about death, right? But at the end of the day, we all got to go. Let's just keep it a buck. Keep it 100, right? And so all of us hope prayerfully you can have least suffering in death. You can have least suffering in death. But the only death I'm going to talk about is the death of Christ because we're coming up on Easter. So some people ask me, why did Jesus have to die on a cross? Why a cross? Why couldn't they just beat him, let him lay there, and just let him go? Why did it have to be a cross? Why did it have to be a tree? So I done some digging. I mean, I went old school. I had to pull out the old school white Bible for this one. Jesus probably died on a cross because the very first thing you did was went out of his presence. Remember, right? He died on a cross. You were in the garden. He died on a cross. You was in the garden. I'm going to bring everybody back. Don't even worry about it. You might look a little lost there, right? And so I got out of the presence of God after what? I sinned. The trees were where at? In his presence. So therefore, God said, do not eat of the tree of what? Good and evil. That tree was located in Eden. And that Eden was located where? In the presence of God. And so when we're going to talk about why she stole the fruit too. But when she stole the fruit, I don't know if it was an apple. I don't know if it was a pomegranate. All I know, it was a fruit, right? But when she stole the fruit, it took them out of the presence of God. So in order for him to restore you, to get you back, he got to put you back in his presence. So maybe the reason, I'm not saying this is it. I'm not saying, but when you think, maybe that's the reason it had to be a tree. Because you stole from me a tree. You took yourself out of my presence by touching something I told you not to touch. So your foundation has been off. So let me lay on this tree and give my life so you can restore your life. Maybe that's why it had to be a tree. Then, we got, they pierced his hands, right? Pierced his hand. People got sticky fingers, right? Sticky fingers. They steal credit cards. God forgive me. I know I'm not going to say everybody in here stole something. I know I used to. I ain't going to lie. Right? So when I used to go to Canton Middle School, all the kids used to get off the bus, 13 bus, run into one store, grab all the candy we want, run right out. Right? But even if you haven't stole anything from even if you haven't stole no candy, even if you haven't stole no money, you probably stole somebody's heart. So you've stolen something in life. Maybe you hijacked their feelings. Maybe you hijacked their emotions. Everybody stole something from somebody at some point. That's why his hands had to be pierced. So in order for him to make your hands be unsticky, he had to take a nail through them so the blood can cover your hands, so for the stickiness that you had on your hands, right? And then they had to pierce his feet. They got to pierce his feet because it represents progress. It represents progress. How many steps before you found Christ? How many steps before you found Christ have you went in the wrong direction? Going down the wrong street. Going up the wrong alley. I mean, you going up a one way. You're supposed to be coming down. And so his feet had to be pierced in order to get you back on the right track. Okay? In order to get you back on the right track. And another one, right? They had to pierce him in his side. Why did they pierce him in his side? Why did Jesus have to get pierced in his side? I'm telling you, I went old school. I had to pull out the old white Bible, right? They pierced him in the side, I believe, is because if your spouse is pulled out of you, it can be emotionally draining. Because something from me is missing. And so in order for God to restore not only myself, but also my spouse that was created for me, guess what? He had to get pierced in his side. And so because he was pierced in his side, I shouldn't have doubt. My spouse shouldn't have doubt. And we should have a what? A clarity of mind. Because not only did blood come out of his side, water fell flowing as well. So maybe that's why it had to be a cross. And last but not least, they put a what? A crown on his head. Because they said what? The ground is cursed and it comes from thorn and thistles. So everywhere that we walk, because they twisted the crown on his head. It renewed everything that has a part of our life. That's why he was crucified. That's why it had to be a cross. That's why the lashes are irrelevant, whether it was 39 or 40. Jesus died, and he got back up. He died for us because we suffer and don't even pay attention to our own suffering. So haven't you suffered enough? Hasn't he literally suffered enough? He putting you back in his presence. He's cleaning your hands. He's putting your feet back on the right path. He's connecting that relationship that came out of you. And he's changing every place that you walk. Amen. So in closing, everybody done got quiet on me, right? So in closing, the pure and perfect innocence of Jesus Christ, it gives us his wisdom and his power. And it lets us know, because he died on a cross, we are all present in his body. Because he died on the cross, and the way that he died on the cross, the beating he took, the piercings he took, what it does is it perfects our imperfect human body. And with that being said, amen.